most people come in with the perception that if they have some cash, the business will just run by itself magically. But the unique thing is there is a small percentage of businesses that do allow more of a passive ownership. But what I would say to that is you have to be well funded to do that, because if you aren't planning on being there, you're going to have to hire a GM. And a lot of times people are saying, well, I'm fine with that. But what they don't realize is that there's franchise brands that if they're going to allow that out of the gate, they also are going to require you to give that GM equity in the business, a certain percentage.
Welcome to the Zero to Profitable Franchise Podcast, the best place for you to come to figure out the right franchise to buy and how to get and stay profitable. My name is Tarek Johnson, and I've bought, grown, and sold multiple franchises and got myself free from corporate America, and now I'm on a mission to help you do that too. Here you'll find some of the most in-depth profitable franchise secrets, tangible strategies, and specific mindsets to help you create your dream life through franchising. All right, so let's talk about semi-absentee and passive ownership. It's a hot topic in the industry. We obviously have a ton of people that will say, hey, I'd love to own a franchise and only work 5 to 10 hours a week, own it passively. Passive income is the big thing these days. So, Mark, let's start with you. What's your take on semi-absentee passive ownership, and specifically, when can it work and when doesn't it work?
I think it's probably the biggest misconception in franchising, honestly. And I think it's the topic we deal with and have to overcome more than any other. By that, I mean, I think people come to us thinking that the franchising model has a lot to do with writing a check, becoming a franchise owner, going to Tahiti and getting foot massages, and having money just come in under your door by doing nothing. That's an exaggeration, but that's a lot of the mentality that's out there. What I like to tell people is it's completely opposite. And if you're not willing to get into your business and work harder than you ever have in your life for 2 years, it's probably not for you. So I think the first thing on active versus passive is there's just not a lot of brands that are looking for people who want to be passive investors. Most of the people that we work with, most of the franchise brands that we work with, want full-time people involved in their business every single day. Now, that being said, the goal of any franchise business and anybody who becomes a franchise owner is to scale that business by working hard, making that business more profitable, adding staff members as you grow, and ultimately giving that owner the chance to have a passive lifestyle. So passive businesses are there, but you have to earn that right, in my opinion, to become a passive owner. So that's kind of the explanation that we give. Now, and the other side of it is, are there passive businesses? Sure. If people want to buy vending machines, they can invest in vending machines. And they can put vending machines all over the town if they want, because the vending machines do the work. So there are certain categories of passive businesses, but I think most people who come to us thinking about passive businesses aren't thinking about stacking vending machines each day. They're really thinking about running a business without their involvement. And I don't see how that works.
Yeah. And Laura, there's a difference between passive and semi-absentee. How do you distinguish the two? And what's your take on the topic of when it can work and when it doesn't work?
With passive, I think I agree with Mark that most people come in with the perception that if they have some cash, the business will just run by itself magically. But the unique thing is there is a small percentage of businesses that do allow more of a passive ownership. But what I would say to that is you have to be well funded to do that, because if you aren't planning on being there, you're going to have to hire a GM. And a lot of times people are saying, well, I'm fine with that. But what they don't realize is that there's franchise brands that if they're going to allow that out of the gate, they also are going to require you to give that GM equity in the business, a certain percentage. So you have to be prepared for that as well. So if it's something that you're thinking, I'm going to have the business, it's going to get up and going, and I'm going to keep everything that comes in, you're going to have to adjust your thinking and plan for having other expenses, because not only do you need a GM, but you may need to give them equity as well. So being passive isn't always ideal. You're going to need to be more capitalized in order to invest in those businesses that offer that. And then on the semi-absentee track, I think it goes back to what Mark was saying, is you have to get there. all businesses take effort on the upfront to get started. And the majority of the time, the franchise owners or franchise brands, excuse me, are going to want the franchisee to be the one involved to do that.
That's a great point. If I could just add to what Laura just said, she's absolutely right. But there's a difference. So, I mean, to me, passive and semi-absent, to me, are kind of the same, because the people who are using those terms are not discerning the difference between them, first. But second of all, in what Laura just described, it wasn't a passive business opportunity. It was the owner decided to make it passive by putting a full-time operator in that business. And you're right, if you don't put somebody with equity, first of all, the brands aren't going to want it, because then they're just an employee who could walk out the door. But in that case that you described, Laura, it's still not a passive business. It's an active, everyday someone running it. But you're right, if you built businesses before, if you have a huge inventory of other companies and your job is to go buy one and run it passively, you can. But that's not the business being passive. That's the owner being passive and still doing the right thing. So there's a definite line of demarcation, so to speak, on those types of businesses.
Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.